So again, welcome to this webinar. Today we're going to talk about what's new in ForNAV 3.1. My name is Mark Brummel and I'm Senior Product Specialist for ForNAV. So we have a lot of things to cover today. We learned this morning that the webinar will take approximately 45 minutes, including Q&A, depending on how many questions you guys have. We're going to start with the converter, and then we'll dive into the designer. We'll talk a little bit about word wrapping, and then we'll end with the improvements and shipping of new standard reports. So the converter has been the base of the product since day one. It's also the most stable part of reports for NAV. We don't get a lot of feedback or bugs anymore, but every now and then people come up with great ideas and small issues. I want to highlight two things that we changed in the converter. The first one is quite obvious if you open the converter. That is that we decided that we have some real estate that we can use to share with you the cool stuff that we are working on. You can see here in the top that we are shipping an object explorer if you want to work with extensions. It has nothing to do with ForNAV, but it's kind of cool to have it. And Michael and I had a lot of fun building it. So enjoy working with that. The second option that we've added is in the advanced tab. And here we have an option to add a comment to the object. So let's say that you are in a conversion scenario, customer is upgrading, and you want to add a comment to the report that it's upgraded to ForNAV. Then you can do that. So here I have a comment converted to ForNAV. And let's go to an object. This is an NAV 2009 classic report. You can see by the version number that it's 2009. And if I go to the end of the file, you can see that the RDL data is empty. And currently I don't have anything in the documentation trigger. So if I select this file as my input file, and I'm going to write the fornav.txt file as an output file, you can see that I'm using a text file as an input for the table definition. I like this option because it allows me to convert reports without having access to the customer database. Sometimes that can be necessary if you have a customer with difficult VPN connections and you just want to do some offsite work. So let me hit convert, and the report is converted. I can look at the log and all lights are green. Conversion is completed. And if I look at my text file, you will see that the RDL data is generated, which is actually the ForNAV data, but we're hijacking this part from Microsoft. And you can see that we have some documentation where it's converted to ForNAV. So let's import this guy into Seaside. I'm using NAV 2018 cumulative update 3 with North American localization. And if I import my text file and compile the report, let's design it and look at the documentation trigger. Documentation trigger is populated. If something was already there, we just add it to the end, or at least I'm assuming that we do that. I haven't actually tested it, but assume that Jacob and Michael are smart enough to do that. And let me run the report just to prove to you once more that we do 100% report conversion. And you can see that this looks exactly like classic Navision invoice before we went to RDLC. Of course, we did a whole bunch of small fixes. People find stuff all the time. And if you want to have a look at what we fixed, it's not that much, but maybe you are running into an issue with an older version and you want to see if we already fixed it, you can go to this website, and here you can see what we've done. And if you do a search on convert, you can actually see that that you can search for whatever we changed in the converter. So let's switch over to the designer, where cool stuff happens. Here we have improved the way that we do dialogues with the developers. Before I'm going to show you what we did, I'm going to show you what the Microsoft dialogues look like. So let me create a new report with the item table. If I design or if I search for a table, you can see that this is the way that Seaside developers have to search for tables. It's very hard to search here. This is why a lot of Navision developers know table numbers by heart. We type in 18 or 27 or 32. And also, if I want to change the way we look at the data, so let's say I want to sort on inventory. I think since a couple of releases, I never know if it's 2015 or 2013 R2, but since a couple of releases, it's possible now to sort NAV reports on flow fields. But if I go to the data item table view, and if I look at the key is still pointing to the keys that are explicitly defined in the metadata of the table. But I can type in inventory if I want to, inventory, and I can set the no, this is wrong. I have to change this guy to item, of course, and then I can say inventory. I shouldn't go off script with this stuff. And I change it to descending, and now I can say filter where inventory filter larger than 0, so everything which is on inventory. And then if I say max iteration is 25, I get a list of items which are in inventory sorted by the item that has most inventory. If I do the same with reports for NAV, so let's go to the designer and let's just create a completely new report from the report template. I can save the report in my database because in my settings window, I have pointed my designer to my database and I have given it access to the Seaside runtime. So I save the report in my NAV database. It compiles the report. And because it's a blank report, it doesn't have any data items if I design it. But if I run it, I get the open in designer flag in the request page. And as soon as I design a ForNAV report from the request page, I get a connection to the .NET backend of the NAV Windows client. And now I can go into my report explorer, hit the right mouse on the report ForNAV tag. And now I can insert a data item. And I can still type in the table number if I know it by heart, but if I don't know it, I can go to the assist edit. And now I can type in 27, or I can say 36. And it actually finds all the tables that are related to that number. It's not only searching in the number column, it's also searching in the name column. So it finds all the Office 365 tables. If I type in customer, it also finds all the customer tables. So let's not go off script again. Let's nicely pick the item table. And from the item table, I'm going to insert another data item. And the other data item is going to be the item ledger entry. So now I want to change the way that we look at the item table. I want to change the item table view. And if I click on sorting, I get a list of all fields, not only the key fields. And I can simply select the field that I want to sort on, which in this case is inventory. If I add more fields, it will just add more fields. This does not mean that for large data sets, you don't need SQL to have indexes, but it's not forced to have an index if you just want to have a quick report on a small data set that you want to have sorted in any way. I can also filter on any field. We have a nice filter window where I can say I only want to see items that start with 7, so I get all the paint in my database. And I can create a link between the item table and the item ledger entry table. I get the same type of window where I can connect all the fields from one table to another table. So this makes it even easier to work with ForNAV. You don't have to create the data set in C-side anymore. You can do everything without leaving ForNAV, the ForNAV designer. It is something that is highly recommended to be used from the Windows client, because if you start ForNAV from the Windows client, we create a connection to the running .NET bits, and that allows us to do all of this really cool stuff. So let's close this report. We don't need it anymore, and let's go back to the list of changes. We also save the position of your dialogues. So if you don't like the dialog in the size that we have designed it, you resize it, it will open up in the same size and in the same position next time you use the ForNAV designer. Another thing that we have improved is CanGrow. We got a lot of feedback from you guys, especially those who have already worked with RDLC, that CanGrow is a really nice feature that allows you to grow a table cell automatically if the contents doesn't fit in the window. At first, we thought that we couldn't get this to work because we wanted to have trans headers and trans footers. And if you want to have trans headers and trans footers, you need to know your page size. But I'm happy to say that we have a very smart team, and we actually got this to work without having to compromise the fact that we have trans headers and trans footers. So let me show you how it works. For that, I'm going to create another report from scratch, and I'm not going to use the blank report, but I'm going to use the item inventory template. This automatically will populate some fields for me, including a table with a description. And let me make the description big. Let me make it 26 points or 28. So it actually goes already outside of the boundary of the table. It already looks ugly. And again, I'm going to save it to the database, override the report that I've just created, and close the designer, run the report from C-side, and create the connection to the .NET backend. So now I can preview my report, and I can make changes to the report all I want without having to save it. And you can see that this looks darn ugly, and I don't want my customers to have this experience. So the first thing I want to do is I want to tell ForNAV that I want this section to be able to grow. The body section has a CanGrow property, and if I tell ForNAV that this body, this section can grow, it can automatically adopt to the changes. But if I preview it right now, it doesn't do anything yet because I haven't told the report yet which cells I want to grow. So if I change this cell to CanGrow yes, it allows this specific cell to grow, and now you can see it looks really nice and actually displays the data. I still have some words breaking off. I still cannot see everything. In order to make that work, I also have to change the multiline to yes. If I change the multiline to yes, I will get words that don't fit into my table in a second row automatically, and it grows with me. You'll still have the trans headers, trans footers, page count, everything still works as you expect from the ForNAV product. This has also been implemented in a couple of standard reports, and I'll show you where and how this has been implemented when we touch base on that subject. Back to the list, printing to Excel. A lot of accountants love working with Excel. They like slicing, dicing data and copying and pasting, and maybe change a little bit of the way the report looks before printing it and sending it off or emailing it to somebody. I'll demo this with one of our standard reports, the aged accounts receivables report. If I run this report and preview the results, I'll tick the print details option. If I preview this report, you see it looks very nice with the watermarks and colors that we've put in the standard reports. But if you decide after the preview that you want to have this data in Excel anyway, then you simply save it to Excel after the preview, and then you'll get the same data in Excel. There is one caveat, especially if you use this with our standard reports. If I run the same report again, and without going to the preview, I directly go to Excel, you'll notice that the report looks different. When we directly save reports to Excel, we assume that the accountant or the CFO wants to slice and dice the data, and from here you can immediately insert a pivot table, and you don't actually want to have all the headers and stuff in that report. We do that by triggering visibility, was something Jakob came up with, which is a great idea, and we actually don't show some of the data outputs when we print to Excel. This print to variable is not set to Excel if you save to Excel from the preview. It's too late. We don't render the report again. We just carry over whatever we have into Excel. So this is important. You can use the save to Excel from the preview, but if you have any JavaScript in your report, then that JavaScript is not executed again. It's just carried forward as is. Address formatting has changed as well. The built-in address formatting is one of the nicest features of ForNAV. You don't have to do any coding. You don't have to create an array of variable strings, and you don't have to compress the array and concatenate the zip code and the city. We all do that for you in the product without coding. But we got some feedback from the channel that we are taking the wrong data for the formatting. We used to take the language, which may be wrong. You may have a customer that has its language set to English and send the invoice to Sweden, and then you get English postcode formatting for a Swedish customer. So we changed that behavior. We changed it to the country table like you are expecting from NAV. So let me demo that, because there is a caveat here as well that you should be aware of. At least it was something that I ran into when I upgraded one of my customers from ForNAV version 2 to ForNAV version 3. I'll create an empty report again and save it in my database. Then I'm going to connect that report to the company information table. I always like using the company information table when doing demos for the address. It doesn't print a whole bunch of pages. So let me do that again by going to insert a data item. Of course, I know it's table 79, so I don't need the fancy new table selector. And I can insert a body and drag in my address fields. I'm also going to insert the picture. not for any particular reason other than bragging about our cool designer and the fact that you can just do that without coding. And if I preview this report now from the designer, it gives me a heads up. I changed the data set and I cannot preview the report without saving it. So I say, yes, please go ahead, save the report and show me the results. You can see that the address is there, but it's not fully displayed. So let's go back and use our fantastic CanGrow again. If I display the report again, you can now see that it actually grows the address as well. So this control is now bigger than its original size. This does not grow if I put it here, right? If I put it at the bottom of my body and I preview it again, it doesn't grow. And it doesn't grow because my body is not explicitly allowed to grow. If I change this to grow, then it will actually grow because now my body is also allowed to grow. So that's an important difference between allowing a control to grow and allowing a section to grow. If we look at the address, you can see that this is Canada. So the zip code is after the city, which is fine. But let's say that I want to change that. I don't want the zip code to be displayed in front of the city. I wanted to do the Dutch way. I want to have it the other way around. So let's go to NAV and go to our country region list and edit the list and go to Canada here, and we'll change it to the zip code and city. If I change that and preview it again, it doesn't change. And the reason for that is we don't want to read that table every time you run a report. So we're actually caching the data from the table in memory. And if you make a change to the list of countries and regions, you actually have to restart the service tier. That sounds stranger than it is because I don't think many of you change the country table all the time. And we all want the system to perform as fast as possible. But this is something that I run into in one of our support incidents. So I thought it was important to mention. Other than that, we're not doing any data caching in ForNAV, but we just decided that it made sense to cache this, so you don't read the data all the time over and over again. So now it actually prints the zip code in front of the city, Dutch style. We also implemented username password authentication in those scenarios where you don't have Active Directory enabled. If you go to the designer and you go to the page where you connect your designer to the NAV backend, you can select database authentication, and here you can put in a username and a password. And this allows you to connect to any system without being a member of the Active Directory. We fixed the Sparkline. The Sparkline is one of the more advanced controls that we have in ForNAV. We used to have it in the customer top 10 list, but we changed that. I'll talk about that in a minute. But if I drag a Sparkline into my report, you will see that the default color for a Sparkline is nice and red, ForNAV red probably. Let me change it to bar, and of course I need some data, so let me add a data table for this, and I'll just create one with only the value of 10. So we'll get a bar chart with one column that has a value of 10, but it's not important right now. I just want to show you that it flips colors. So now we have a red chart, and let's say I want to change that to Dutch orange. I can actually preview the report again, and now it switches colors, right? One of the things we fixed. A brand new feature that we're going to do a dedicated webinar about is the support of HTML and rich text fonts in ForNAV. You can add HTML to a ForNAV control, and it will interpret that HTML and render that in your report. You can do fantastic creative things with that, and I'm going to show you that in the webinar probably in May, I think. I dedicated a slide to smart word wrapping because I think it's an extremely nice feature. It's something that we've inherited from the web world. You know, sometimes you have these situations where you have a column and like maybe posting date, and the posting date is 6 characters. And posting date is actually, as a word, longer than the date itself. So you try to make the column smaller, but then the word comes out ugly. In Dutch, for example, posting date is 1 word, boekingsdatum. And we've implemented a technique which is called soft hyphens that automatically breaks words if it finds that it doesn't fit. We've implemented in English, German, Dutch, and Danish. And if you like the feature and you're using ForNAV in Italian or Portuguese or French, just send us a list of verbs that you think we can break down, soft hyphen, and we'll implement those languages as well. To demonstrate it, I'm going to switch my language to Dutch. And again, I'm going to use one of the standard reports to demo this. If you want to demo ForNAV for one of your customers, most of the features are in the standard reports. So I'm going to use the sales commission report. And now you can see it's actually in Dutch. And if I do a preview, you will see that the posting date, it's a small column, and the boekingsdatum, which is in Dutch, is automatically broken into 2 words with a dash. If I go to the table where we get this caption from, which is the customer ledger entry table, if I go to the posting date, you will see that posting date in Dutch is 1 word, and we automatically insert the hyphen to break it up. So if you provide us with a list of words that you think make sense, like datum or other things, then we can implement that in the product, and your reports will immediately look a lot nicer if you try to squeeze that data into smaller columns. So this morning I made the mistake of not changing my client back to English, and I continued the webinar in English. So let's not do that again. Let's switch it back to English immediately. And let's switch to the ForNAV standard reports. This is where my responsibility kicks in. This is what I do at ForNAV. So I kind of feel like right now I am a poet and I'm reading my own poetry for you. We got some feedback on the way that we use languages, translations, and we got some feedback on the way that we use watermarks. Some people really like the fact that if you have a customer in Finland, that their invoice is in Finnish, but some people don't like it at all, that they are sending out an invoice that they can't read themselves. So we made it optional to translate documents in customers' languages. The default option is set to true. So by default, we still translate invoices into customers' languages. But if you untick this option, the invoice will be printed in the end user's language. We also got some feedback on the watermarks. Whenever we preview a report, we put in the watermark so it really looks nice. And then when you print it to a real printer, the watermark disappears. This is nice if you have pre-printed paper for your invoices, but a lot of smaller companies don't have pre-printed paper, or sometimes you just want to do some demoing. So if you untick this use pre-printed paper tick, then we are not hiding the watermark if you print to a real printer. And if you have pre-printed paper, you just tick this option, and we will automatically make the watermark disappear if you print to the real printer. We've implemented a new web service that you can find in the list of web services in the Windows client. If you go to web services, you will find it next to the Fields web service. It's called Fields X, which is short for Fields Extended. This web service gives ForNAV the data it needs for table relations. And we use table relations to automatically allow you, if you, for example, have a location code in your table, you can automatically drag in the location name without doing any coding. And this web service is actually reading that data from your own tables and allowing you to do that on customized tables as well. We also spend a lot of time on translations. If you look at the report pack that is shipped with ForNAV version 3.1, there are a number of new reports that I will touch on in a minute, but we also changed a lot of the existing reports. And if you look at the report, you're like, nothing much has changed, but it's in the details. We found out that in our reports, we were a bit too creative with using English words. And by reverting a lot of words back to standard NAV terminology, we were able to automatically translate to other languages by just stealing translations that Microsoft already provides. So let me quickly demo that again with the ForNAV salesperson commission report. If I go to the layout, and I can do that from C side, I just get this warning. Here I have a header which is saying all amounts are in local currency. If I click on the multi-language options, you can see that we currently ship ForNAV in 12 languages. All of the captions that we use in the standard ForNAV reports are standard NAV captions, and by using standard NAV captions, we can automatically translate the reports. We spent a lot of time on writing some scripts, some PowerShell scripts that allow us to automatically translate those reports. If you have a set of ForNAV reports and you need some help in translations, don't hesitate in just sending us an email, and we're more than happy to share the tools that we've created with you so you can do the same with your reports. We've also implemented CanGrow in the document reports. If I go to the ForNAV setup, I can go to my sales template. And in my sales template, we've implemented the CanGrow on the address. So if for whatever reason the address is not big enough, the address, you can imagine it can grow until here. You don't want it to grow until here. It will probably never be bigger than this. But just to be safe, we decided to allow the address to grow. And we also implemented it in the lines body. The line can now grow as well, and the description can grow. And we have changed the snapping of the controls to the top, because if you allow a control to be multiline and grow, it looks really ugly if you keep the default alignment in the middle. So we changed the alignment to top, and that's also why you see this little white line in between the header. That makes the report looks a little bit nicer. I can demo this by going into my quotes. I have prepared a quote with a long text. I'm sorry I couldn't be more creative than a bunch of W's. But if I print this to a report, you can actually see that it jumps into the multi-line. And you can also see that the controls snap to the top. So everything is aligned nicely. This is also where having the template reports come in handy, because I only had to do this change in the template reports, and I don't have to go into all the individual reports to do the same change. We changed the charts on the customer and vendor top 10 list. We used the Sparkline before, but we actually changed to the full chart option. If you print the report, you will see that we show the balance and the net change. This is something that was not possible with the Sparkline, or at least not with two different colors. And this also makes the customer top 10 list a good place to look for inspiration. If you have a customer and the customer wants you to print a chart on a report, first you should ask him to please use Power BI. And then if he insists you to use a chart on a report, then you can learn from this report and steal some of our code. We also made some performance improvements and some design improvements to the reports, especially to the aging reports. If I jump to the next slide, you will see in the list of new reports that we ship is the customer statement. If I design the customer statement, or let me run it first. If I run the customer statement report, we have the option to include an aging band. And if I include an aging band in the statement report, you will get almost the same data in the statement report as that you have in the customer aging report. Unfortunately, the standard Microsoft way of solving this is just copy and pasting code, and you'll end up with a lot of duplicated code. And I didn't want to have that, so I changed the way that we work with aging data. If I design the report, you will see that we have an aging buffer table. And if I go to my aging reports, the aging reports also use the same aging buffer tables. And these buffer tables automatically adopt to vendor or customer input. And it's basically like an API where you just give it some input and it calculates the output for you. And I think we need to do a dedicated webinar. If people like that, I can explain how this is created. There is some dark magic with some recrefs and field refs and variants there. But once you know the input and output, it's very easy to glue everything together. We also shipped the warehouse shipment document and the warehouse receipt document. It's a little bit selfish because I needed those reports in one of my own implementations that we went live on January 1st. The good news is that these reports are actually used like this in a real life scenario. The bad news is that Microsoft does not provide report selections for the warehouse. So we cannot automatically replace the report selections like we do in sales and GL and purchase. You actually have to go into the C-side code and change it. Pretty sure Microsoft will have to change that once they want their baby to go into cloud with extensions. But right now it's not possible yet to change the warehouse reports without changing the core application. Last report before we go into Q&A. We are exactly on the same timeline as we were this morning. Is the customer payments report. This report displays the payments reconciliation with the invoices. And again, I can't say this enough, but if you look at the standard ForNAV reports, we are never, ever, ever using columns unless we really have to. We always try to use the ForNAV features of adding data using the field list. This makes it a lot easier for your customers to make changes. This allows your customers to make changes even if they don't have Report Designer in their license. They can simply add their own layout on top of the existing layout. And we use the JavaScript engine to create business logic. So it allows customers to make changes. A lot of customers, you will be surprised, but a lot of customers have some guy running around who is perfectly capable of writing JavaScript.
ForNAV is here to help you with reports. We are ready to talk. Are you?